A neighborhood didn't know for years. That mysterious man at the grocery store that night was Elvis. Memphis, 1975. Fluorescent lights humming. A woman's hand trembling over an empty wallet. A man in sunglasses watching from aisle 3. What happened next wouldn't be discovered until decades later, when a faded receipt and a cashier's diary revealed the truth about one extraordinary night. The king of rock and roll had left the building. But he had entered somewhere else entirely. Somewhere no cameras followed. Somewhere no crowds screamed. Just the quiet aisles of a neighborhood grocery store at 11 p.m., where miracles happened in silence. This is the story of the night Elvis Presley became someone else's hero, and nobody knew until it was almost too late to tell. Subscribe now, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about fame, compassion, and what it means to be truly great. It was late November, 1975. Memphis had that particular kind of cold that seeps through jacket seams and settles in bones. The kind of night when working families counted pennies twice before spending them once. Linda Morrison was one of those families. A single mother of 3, working double shifts at a textile factory, trying to keep food on the table and hope in her children's hearts. That night, she stood in Ferguson's grocery store on Elvis Presley Boulevard, ironically, adding up prices in her head while her youngest daughter, Sarah, tugged at her worn coat. "Mama, can we get the cereal with the toy inside?" Linda's eyes were doing mathematics that had nothing to do with joy. Milk, bread, eggs, the cheapest cuts of meat. She had $17.32. The cart held $19 worth of absolute necessities. She started removing items. The margarine first. Then the extra loaf of bread. Her hands moved mechanically, but her heart was breaking in that quiet way mothers' hearts break when their children are watching. But someone else was watching too. In aisle 3, partially hidden behind a display of canned vegetables, stood a man in dark sunglasses, a leather jacket, and a scarf pulled high around his neck. To the few late-night shoppers present, he was just another customer. Maybe someone trying to avoid recognition after a bad day. Maybe someone who didn't want to be bothered. They had no idea they were standing in the presence of the most famous entertainer on the planet. Elvis Aaron Presley had left Graceland that night in his own car, without security, without entourage, without fanfare. He did this sometimes, needing to remember what the world felt like when you were just a person, not a phenomenon. He'd grown up poor in Tupelo, Mississippi. He remembered the weight of poverty, the mathematics of survival, the shame that came with wanting things you couldn't afford. And as he watched Linda Morrison put back items while her daughter's face fell with each removal, something in him cracked open. Not the Elvis who performed for millions. The Elvis who had once been a boy whose mama couldn't always put food on the table. He moved closer, pretending to examine soup cans, watching the scene unfold with increasing intensity. Linda had made her final calculations. She approached the checkout counter with her reduced cart, forcing a smile for her daughter that didn't reach her eyes. The cashier, a young woman named Dorothy Jenkins, began scanning items with the tired efficiency of someone working the late shift. Then Elvis made his move. He walked up to the counter, not beside Linda, but at the adjacent register. He caught Dorothy's eye and did something that would seem insignificant to anyone watching but would change everything. He handed her a note. Dorothy read it. Her eyes widened. She looked at Elvis, then at Linda, then back at Elvis. He put a finger to his lips, the universal gesture for silence, and pressed a roll of cash into Dorothy's hand. What happened next seemed like a normal checkout procedure, but it was anything but normal. Dorothy turned to Linda. "Ma'am, I need to check something with the manager real quick." "Don't worry. This'll just take a second." Linda nodded, confused but patient. Dorothy disappeared into the back office. When she returned 2 minutes later, her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. "Ma'am, there's been a mistake in our system tonight. You've been selected for our customer appreciation program. Your groceries tonight are complimentary." Linda blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your groceries are free tonight. And actually, the program extends to additional items if you'd like to go back and get anything else you need." I don't understand. Dorothy smiled, a genuine smile now, understanding she was part of something beautiful. Sometimes good things just happen, ma'am. Please take your time, get what your family needs. Elvis was already gone, slipping out the automatic doors into the November night, but his presence lingered in that store like a song you can't forget. Linda, still confused but overwhelmed with gratitude, went back through the store. This time, she didn't count. She got the cereal with the toy. She got the good cuts of meat. She got fresh vegetables and fruit. She got everything her children needed and some things they simply wanted. When she returned to the checkout, there was more. Dorothy, following the instructions Elvis had left, handed her an envelope. The program also includes vouchers for the next 6 months, Dorothy said, her voice thick with emotion she was trying to hide. Come back every week. Get what you need. Linda Morrison broke down crying right there in the checkout lane. Her daughter Sarah, not understanding but feeling everything, wrapped her small arms around her mother's waist. What Linda didn't know, what nobody in that store knew except Dorothy, was that the man in sunglasses had paid for not just Linda's groceries, but had left enough money to cover groceries for every struggling family Dorothy identified over the next 6 months. He had given Dorothy a simple instruction. Help the ones who look like they're doing math instead of shopping. But here's where the story becomes even more extraordinary. Dorothy was sworn to secrecy. Elvis had made her promise. Don't tell anyone it was me, he had said. Let them think it's the store. Let them think it's luck. Let them think it's anything except charity from someone famous. Let them keep their dignity. And Dorothy kept that promise. For 23 years. Because that's the kind of man Elvis Presley was when nobody was watching. The groceries continued for 6 months, exactly as promised. Linda Morrison never knew who had done it. She wrote letters to the grocery store chain, praising their customer appreciation program. The corporate office, confused but seeing good publicity, took credit for it. They even implemented an actual program based on the letters they received. Linda's life changed in those 6 months. With the burden of grocery expenses lifted, she was able to save enough money to move to a better apartment. She was able to buy her children winter coats that actually fit. She was able to breathe. Her daughter Sarah grew up and became a teacher. She never forgot the night in the grocery store, the night her mother cried tears of relief instead of stress. She built her entire philosophy of giving on that memory, on the belief that miracles could happen in ordinary places. But the truth of that night remained hidden until 1998. Dorothy Jenkins was retiring after 43 years in grocery retail. She was 72 years old and had kept Elvis's secret for 23 years, through all the years of his fame, through his death in 1977, through decades of Elvis tributes and documentaries and books. She had kept it because he had asked her to, and because she understood that some acts of kindness are more powerful when they're silent. But now, with her retirement approaching and feeling the weight of an untold story, Dorothy decided it was time for the truth to come out. Not for publicity. Not for attention. But because she believed the world needed to know what Elvis Presley was really like. She reached out to Linda Morrison, who was now Linda Morrison Hayes, a grandmother herself. They met at a small coffee shop in Memphis, 2 elderly women with a shared secret that one of them didn't even know existed. Dorothy brought with her a small metal box. Inside was the note Elvis had given her that night, the original instructions written in his distinctive handwriting, and a photograph she had secretly taken of him as he left the store that night, the only evidence that he had been there. When Linda read the note, when she understood what had really happened that November night in 1975, she wept the same way she had wept in the checkout lane. But these tears were different. These tears were the realization that the greatest musician of his generation had seen her struggle, and had chosen to act with such grace and discretion that she could receive help without shame. The note was simple. Help this lady and others like her. Let them think it's anything but charity. People deserve kindness, but they also deserve dignity. Here's enough for 6 months. If you need more, contact my office with code word Tupelo. Don't use my name. Thank you for your discretion. EP. The story, when Dorothy finally shared it with a local newspaper, went viral. Not just in Memphis, not just in America, but worldwide. People who had spent decades criticizing Elvis, reducing him to a caricature of sequins and sideburns, were forced to confront the reality of a man who had never forgotten where he came from. Share this story if you believe real greatness is measured not in gold records but in quiet acts of human dignity. Subscribe to hear more stories about the heroes hiding in plain sight. But the story doesn't end there. Because Elvis's instruction, "If you need more, contact my office," implied something even more profound. Dorothy admitted, in later interviews, that she had used that code word, Tupelo, 17 times over the following years, always for families in desperate need, and every single time, money had arrived with the same instructions: discretion, dignity, silence. Even after his death, the Elvis Presley estate honored those requests, having been given standing instructions to respond to Dorothy's calls. The program continued, in various forms, for another decade, helping an estimated 200 families in the Memphis area. Linda Morrison Hayes devoted the rest of her life to volunteer work at food banks. She started a nonprofit called Silent Kindness that operated on Elvis's principle: help people in ways that preserve their dignity. No publicity. No credit. Just assistance when it's needed most. Her daughter Sarah, now a high school principal, keeps the original cereal box with the toy inside in her office. It's faded and worn, but she keeps it as a reminder that someone saw her mother's struggle and chose to act with extraordinary compassion. In 2002, on what would have been Elvis's 67th birthday, Memphis erected a small plaque near the site of the old Ferguson's grocery store, which had long since closed. The plaque doesn't tell the whole story. It simply says, "Sometimes the greatest performances happen off stage. In memory of quiet kindness. Those who know, understand. Those who don't, feel the mystery of it, the sense that something profound happened here, even if they can't name exactly what." That's the power of what Elvis did that November night in 1975. He didn't just feed a family. He didn't just help a neighborhood. He created a ripple of kindness that spread for decades, inspiring others to act with the same grace, the same discretion, the same understanding that true generosity doesn't need an audience. The man who made millions scream could also make one mother cry tears of relief in a grocery store checkout lane, and he considered the latter just as important as the former. Because Elvis Presley understood something that fame often obscures: we're all just people trying to make it through. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with your platform is step off it completely and meet someone exactly where they are, in the fluorescent lit reality of their everyday struggle. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that goodness still exists in unexpected places. Subscribe to keep these stories alive, because in a world of headlines and noise, sometimes the most important stories are the ones that were kept secret for 23 years. The legacy of that night lives on. Not in gold records or sold-out shows, but in the countless acts of quiet kindness inspired by one man's decision to be human first and famous second. In Dorothy's continued volunteer work at retirement homes. In Linda's nonprofit that has helped thousands. In Sarah's philosophy of teaching, which emphasizes dignity and compassion above all else. And somewhere in Memphis, in a storage facility, there's a box containing receipts from Ferguson's grocery store, dated November 1975, with notations in Dorothy's handwriting. EP program. Family helped. 23 families that month alone. 200 over the years. Each receipt represents a moment when someone's desperation met someone else's compassion, when the math of survival was recalculated by the addition of unexpected grace. Elvis Presley died in 1977, but that night in the grocery store, he lives forever. Not in the concerts. Not in the movies. But in the memory of a little girl who got her cereal with the toy inside, and in the heart of a mother who learned that sometimes, angels wear sunglasses and leather jackets. The king left the building. But he never really left at all.